Hey, so uh, I don't know if I would consider this one of the big four, and one of the big four here is missing one of the ones that I would consider the big four. Um, and honestly, uh, and I've mentioned it somewhat in my videos, but I do just want to show something. So this is my first actually SGC card. I've seen them online. I don't know if I've ever seen them in person. I will admit I do definitely like their slab itself. And I can go over some things too that I do and don't like amongst all of these. I don't know what SGC does in terms of its counterfeit process. I know a lot of the things they do for PSA in terms of counterfeit process. I don't actually know a whole lot in terms of these other two for counterfeit processes, besides just, I guess, what they have on their slabs. PSA has some specifics in terms of their ink and their reflective processes, and some of that kind of adds to, arguably the PSA slab being ugly. Out of these four, if I had to pick cosmetically, honestly, this whole putting a black background around the card itself is actually really clean, really nice. It's definitely more of a squarish like slab. It feels more like I'm holding a picture frame. Don't mind that crack. I didn't do that, but honestly, I'm also not worried about it because we're cracking this open later in another video. But going to be honest, if you really do want some pretty slabs, I think this is a really nice looking slab, and I think I got this at a decent price. I think SGC slabs tend to go for a pretty good discount. And honestly, actually, if I was going to do PC, the one thing I wouldn't do PC, I wouldn't use PSA for PC. And a lot of that has to do with display. I wouldn't necessarily send cards into SGC to get graded, but if you had an opportunity to buy a card you already wanted SGC graded, I would strongly recommend that. In fact, I'm actually going to be looking at these to do that. Buying cards that are specifically SGC graded already, ones for PC. I mean, this is a fairly accurate grade in my opinion with the whole 9.5. The only thing I saw on this that would have been the whole 9.5 process is the fact that it's slightly off center. Top to bottom is where a majority of it is, and somewhat left to right, but really most of the off centering on this card is top to bottom, which is things that I agree with. I'm actually not like a huge picky person on centering, like for anything that's like PC. I'm more of a person who doesn't like scratches on the hollow foil. Honestly, I don't like scratches on the front or whitening on the front. If all the damage is on the back, for PC, I honestly don't care, like especially in terms of binder cards. That's just my own personal thing. It's how I've always been as a kid and now. But yeah, of course, I know to look for all those things in terms of getting things graded for extra value. And honestly, so like why I put PSA like up there for PC, you're just going to pay an extra premium, again, unless you're buying PSA 9s, which arguably this is probably one of the best times to buy PSA 9s, at least newly graded PSA 9s, because we know there's a massive scandal going on with PSA in terms of they're making PSA 10 cards, PSA 9s. That's the best time. You're going to be able to buy a PSA 10 card labeled as a 9 for the price of a 9, but it's actually a 10 card. I don't even know if arguably this is one of them. This might very well be. Let me see. There's probably some white. Yeah, there's a nick up top. So this one isn't one of them. This is definitely a 9. But I've got some definitely, even personally, I have some 9s that definitely should have 10'd. That one, yeah, absolutely, that's a 9. We'll move on from that. And the one other slab I wish I had up here, and I have actually been trying to buy, and if you've seen some of my earlier videos, I mean earlier, like 2-3 years ago earlier, I was really talking about tag when it was up and coming, and I really should have struck while the iron was hot, because there were cards that were PSA 9s, PSA 10s. The PSA 9 was going for 400, the PSA 10 was going for 2,000, and the tag 9 was going for 100, and the tag 10 was going for 200. And I should have struck while the iron was hot, and I should have just bought up pre-graded tag slabs, boom, 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 left and right. I think Tag, even out of all these, is probably the cleanest. The only thing that sticks out here is SGC doing the black infill. That would make SGC itself stick out more than Tag, but of course Tag has its own sort of neat like acrylic laser in. I don't exactly know how Tag does it, but it's similar to how Beckett does their B here. I outside of that, Beckett is definitely one of my tops in terms of PC. I just think they got a good weighted slab. People talk about how easy it is to crack open. Again, when people talk about how flimsy something is in terms of these slabs or how they crack open, you're not taking these and throwing them against the ground or the wall. I'm not really worried about the fragility in comparison to other slabs, and really it's negligible when people do these reviews on them. But honestly, for me, especially, if it was a clean black label, BGS is the prettiest slabs. They've got a little bit of a mix of everything going on. They've got the subgrades right there. They've got silver, gold, or black label label inserts. And then, of course, they've got almost like that whole Tag thing going on. And they've been doing this before Tag existed. They've got Beckett imprinted. Where is it? Oh, I could have sworn they had... There it is. They've got Beckett on the side of the slab. They're pretty slabs. The other thing Beckett does that I don't think is known as much, which PSA I think does it, but only if you pay an extra premium. But you can kind of tell. In fact, you should be able to see it right there. Beckett sleeves the card inside, so there is no wiggle room in that case. I don't want to rattle these other ones because the cards do slide around. Beckett does it in a way to where the card is protected even more so from rattling around. So Beckett, in terms of PC, just fantastic. But Beckett is... I've got mixed opinions. I do think some of the reviews on it or videos on it are true. In regards to you really have to pay or know somebody to pay somebody off at Beckett to get your black label. This is not what I'm arguing for. This is just a clean card in general. But I have sent some cards that should have definitely gotten 10s and got 9s, 9.5s, and ones that also should have had a possibility at black labeling. So the Fable black label, I mean, if you can somehow afford it, buy it outright. That's more of PC long-term investment. But in terms of just PC, a BGS 9 is really... BGS 9s go for... are awkwardly, significantly less than PSA 9s in some cases. But if you're buying for PC, this is what you'd want to do, in my opinion. It's just, in my opinion, I don't think... Like, this whole I like that red label PSA thing. It just doesn't go well when you have a card that has a color clash against it versus these other companies that went with some sort of black outlined label or some sort of label that doesn't have a border color, but the label itself was all one whole color. Those just go together way better. And again, Beckett does that whole sleeve thing for every card. It's got more weight to it. It's a more square-off-ish feel. Again, PSA isn't something I would do for PC. SGC, PC, if it's truly you're not looking for some sort of resale value, otherwise you might have to re-crack it open to send it to somewhere else to get that resale value. But that's still fine. It's not the end of the world. I honestly think CGC is upcoming. And I've mentioned that in videos before. I've been watching it. Just like I mentioned Tag was upcoming. And it was kind of, whatever, scoffed at. Tag is nothing. But we have seen consistently over and over Tag cards with the same grades as the PSA sell for more. And actually really significantly more. And it's really becoming more and more prevalent. So I think if you want honestly absolute maximum value, I would go for tag 10s. You know, if you're going to get a tag 10, raid with tag, and also still PC. Because I don't have an example here, I'll have to get one. But tag, the whole thing is see-through acrylic, followed by like this white laser engraved lettering up top, and you know, again, you'd also probably have to put your tag collection against a black background. CGC is good. CGC does what BGS does. They have their own separate black label. And I like a good CGC slab. I think they're pretty solid. I think they got a good feel to them. The back is clean. Everything is, I mean, there's really no argument here. And I wish I had a tag slab to not necessarily make a comparison, but just to have a good example. So just, if you can, go ahead and pretend with me. Let's go ahead and pretend the SGC slab is a tag slab. So, I wish I had a piece of paper where I write tag. So, you know, anyone who's whatever jumping into the video isn't lost for what I'm about to say. And a lot of people get really jumpy and heated on this, but I foresee, and the numbers are really showing it, the grade gem mint rate metrics, you know, that chart we see every now and then that shows how many submissions there are for each grader. They break it down more and more. The one thing I don't know with the data, and maybe someone can fill me in, and don't fill me in if you're guessing. That's why I'm purposely also not adding my 2 cents. You know, don't fill me in with a guess. Fill me in if you actually know, and then also cite your source, please, so we can all reference it. But with those constant, this is last month's submission, I don't know if those are submissions processed or submissions received for the month. And there's some reasons to why I state that, because if it's submissions processed in terms of previous requirements or fill-ins, we're starting to see a reverse log metrics, which is what I refer to in terms of you don't understand metrics, you don't understand why I'm saying what I'm saying, and then also understanding what I'm seeing in terms of viewpoint. CGC is essentially doing what PSA used to do in terms of grading. They aren't charging you more just because the value of the card goes up. They're trying to capture the market as a whole, and they're catering to their customers, and they're really just kind of trying to be a new sort of grade standard. So CGC, I don't know if I would necessarily say it would replace with PSA. I think it will replace PSA, but right now I think it's just something that's going to be a match to PSA, especially in terms of when you see liquidity. CGC numbers honestly are really catching up to PSA. I think really more so even straight comparison. Look at the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz represents 20% of the global oil market. CGC month-to-month numbers are 20-25% of PSA's numbers. So you know, that means PSA has lost 20-25% of its market. If CGC wasn't there, then it means PSA would probably have taken that 20-25% of the graded market. So CGC is taking it, and they're growing, and we're starting to see also a decrease in PSA. So that percentage gap becomes much drastic, much quicker. It's not just one growing, it's one shrinking as well. So you see this percentage gap. Now again, I'm saying pretend this is tag, and you've got your Beckett. Now this might be confusing because CGC does a black label like Beckett does, and PSA does no black label, and that's where some of this confusion probably is. Why wouldn't we be saying tag is replacing PSA and CGC is replacing Beckett, since CGC does a black label, Beckett does a black label, PSA doesn't do a black label, and tag doesn't do a black label. Again, also, if you're catching up, we understand this is a SGC slab. I don't have a tag slab for this reference, so we're pretending this is it for this reference because we're saying tag is to be basically the new BGS. And what we're getting at is getting a tag 10 is much harder than getting a PSA 10. Getting a tag 10 is probably, especially since you have the gamification to where every form of a tag 10 has a higher or lower ranking. That is essentially what the BGS Black Label is. It's the top ranks of the BGS cards and also in terms of the PSA cards. And then also you have to look at how tag is poisoning itself. Tag has its really kind of baseline submission, but then it also has higher up cost submissions, which is very similar to BGS. Yes, PSA and CGC have higher cost submissions, but they really don't have a reason or point for it besides time. Tag and Beckett have higher cost submissions, and it's really more to capture, they're trying to capture the market of more expensive cards, and they want that to be their representation in the market. And so that's what we're seeing. That's why we're seeing tag 10s go for way more than PSA 10s. And then you also have the gamification of tag 10s in terms of, oh, I have the number one. And then you also have tag that does pristine, which is similar to having a secondary label. So the only one who doesn't do a secondary label is PSA, which if they just wanted to have had all their standals, would have made their slabs a bit more not what they've done in terms of colorification with sticking to that red border. We could probably see PSA have held its dominance along with, not having all of its standals and other things that it did. So we're seeing PSA lose its grip on the market. The only last thing you're seeing people talk about, and this is why I say we're seeing PSA lose its grip on the market, the only defense people will have for PSA nowadays, because they no longer have a price value difference. Maybe still with CGC, but there are some CGC cards that go for more than a PSA 10. SGC is what we're comparing. We're comparing tag. So you got tag 10 and Beckett 10s going for more than PSA 10s, and a Beckett 10 should, considering everyone knows a Beckett 9.5 is pretty much 100% a PSA 10, so a Beckett 10 should be more than a PSA 10. Tag 10s are more than PSA 10s in terms of level of scale. CGC 10s probably arguably not better grading than a PSA 10, but then you do also have the CGC Black Label, which we would definitely argue is higher than the PSA 10. So you've got PSA 10 that has set itself to where it can't even grade as high as these other graders. So the last argument in terms of it is liquidity, and all liquidity means is that there's just a higher pop count for cards. And if you're a collector or if you're a true investor, you actually don't even want high pop count. You want extreme low pop count of whatever you have. And there's some ways to gamify that some people have caught on to, and it's kind of being thinned out in terms of the gamification. That gamification being people purposely trying to grade a card a PSA 1 because a PSA 1 technically is a pop 1 of something that doesn't have it graded as a PSA 1, or a 1 of any category. But I've been over this in way older videos from like 5 years ago. A 1 scale of anything is the cumulative of all the scales above it, which if you don't understand math and science, that might be hard to understand that quick sentence. And the video kind of breaks it down, but essentially, if there's a population of that card, like let's say we had this Dragon Knight and it was any of these CGC, Beckett, whatever, and someone had graded it, every 10 people graded it, and each person got a different grade, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The only true pop 1 in that category is the 10. Everything else is just an add-on of the grade above it, because it's possible to go down, but it's not necessarily possible to go up once the damage has occurred. Hopefully I didn't lose you there, but yeah, I need to get a tag for these videos, and just also for PC. There are some things I want to send in a tag, but I am very nervous. Just tag definitely grades very difficult, which is one of the things people didn't like. But again, if you're a collector and investor, you really should be running to tag and sprinting away from PSA. Because again, in order for something to be liquid, it means there's a large pop count. It doesn't mean that there's a huge demand. There's a demand that follows with the pop count, but it just means there's availability across markets for it to sell easily. I'd have to go more into it in terms of the volumes of markets, but you can view this in the stock market in terms of what liquidity means and volume, because that's what we have with PSA. It's a high volume compared to the rest. So the last thing defending PSA right now is just its liquidity, but basically it's like again, we're still using this SGC as if it was a tag. And so we have a tag 10 and a PSA 10, and it's, you can sell within 24 hours for $2,000, or it will take you 48 hours and you'll get $5,000. And so it's even more than double, and it's only double the time. So the whole liquidity argument is really starting to fall apart very quickly.